I want to thank Professor Ansgar Belke for being with us today. He is a professor of the University of Duisburg-Essen in Germany, in the Faculty of Economics and Business Administration. And I give him the floor. He will speak for around a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, and then he will take questions. Professor, thank you very much. You have the floor. Yeah, press the button.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Baron Crespo. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm just coming from Athens, where I sat on a panel on Monday evening, where also the Eurogroup was active in parallel. And we talked about similar issues then proposed here on progress towards an economic union, the European social model, as it may be materializing or not in Greece. So what I do now is that I'm admitting that I'm endowed with many vivid impressions from this talk, and I have changed my plans of my talks here in the short run, because the organizers left us with complete freedom to choose our topic. Originally, I intended to speak about ways out of the European crisis, what roles for France and Germany, with the typical stuff going on. We have many differences among both countries, which in the past often were a complement to each other and served as a blueprint. Once agreement was met between both countries, all others could subscribe. I have chosen my topic at rather short notice because the current situation with respect to Greece is one of the most illuminating practical examples of how to make or to make no progress, we can discuss it later on, towards an economic union or an economic and monetary union. There are also obvious implications for the future of the European social model, I think, from the Greek example. At the same time, it seemed to me yesterday evening to be a perfect application of what Mario Monti yesterday evening called the North-South divide, and exemplifies much of what he dwelt upon later on in his speech. And finally, also the Greek example shows that there are no simple solutions for a genuine EMU governance. And also here I would like to contradict a little bit Baron Crespo. The devil is sometimes in the details. I have the impression that this has been done sometimes intentionally. I don't know exactly, but if I look as an econometrician into the GDP data revisions within the excessive deficit procedure, I see some problems in manipulating the data revisions. We've been concerning this issue appearing at the European Court of Auditors, for instance. So sometimes the devil is in the detail. Admittedly, one of the rare positive sides of the crisis is that our scientific contacts with Greek as well as with other European colleagues have grown significantly and have become manifold in recent years. And my perspective has gained very much, profited very much from my last 5 years here in the Monetary Experts Panel of the European Parliament from 2009 to 2014, the complete last period where we had to deliver briefing papers on almost all aspects of the financial crisis, of course, mainly with the focus on the ECB, because Mario Draghi and formerly Mr. Trichet appeared here in terms of their accountability duties. And also, I served for the DIW Berlin as a research director in the times of the crisis, where we saw Papandreou coming in March 2010 for the first time, a huge media event, and we had to comment for Al Jazeera, ZDF and all the others what is going on there. And since then, Greece was the header in the media and now disappeared to a certain extent. And part of what I will be saying represents joint work with Daniel Gross, Center for European Policy Studies, to which I am also associated, the Center for European Policy Studies. And we have, in January, delivered for the European Parliament a Troika assessment, an assessment of Troika behavior in the program countries. The initiative was done because the IMF itself, in the midst of last year, had some excuse for its apparently underestimating the negative fiscal multiplier, the austerity effects. And Finally, we look forward to work with an international consortium now on fiscal policy coordination. Horizon 2020, a project we have won joint with the Finnish leader. We will do this in the next 2 years. And also we have won a tender by the European Court of Auditors on export performance and internal devaluation in the context of a performance audit of the Greek economic adjustment programme. So this is the programme which we do jointly with Portuguese, Greek and other colleagues, and this is very important. And to stick to time, I proceed with 10 very brief bullet points on the Greek case, always with an eye on the central topic here of the seminar. The first question is, how do I assess the Greek economy after 6 years of unprecedented recession? What we see is a significant progress in rebalancing the economy, and the economy seems to be finally recovering on the back of growing exports. For the first time in 60 years, Greek exporters are winning market share and can create new jobs, but still the Greek economy is not over the hump. At the end of the year, the EU rescue programme will run out. On Monday, they prolonged it for 2 months with an eye on the predated presidential elections, which take place already in January. And on Monday evening, they put up already the short list of candidates for this. As soon as Samaras contemplated about exiting the IMF programme and thus borrowing €12 billion on the capital markets, the yields on Greek bonds skyrocketed again. And this showed that a precipitant exit from the rescue programmes could mean a dangerous backslide for the Greek economy. The financial conditions have improved, but not so much and not sufficiently, and hence Draghi is more and more focusing about quantitative easing in the next year, maybe early next year. We can discuss later on whether this is really a solution for the problems, especially of Greece. And Greece has a very high degree of non-performing loans. In general, competitiveness has still to be increased. For instance, you need a revival of non-tourism exports. But in general, investors and analysts currently not only worry about Greece, but also about the stance and prospects of the French and Italian economies. Mario Monti addressed this yesterday in short. For instance, the ESM's Klaus Regling, in a recent interview, claimed that they should at least partially follow the example of Greece. And from my point of view, it seems fair to state that the successes of Greece are completely underestimated. For instance, Greece has gone away from having the weakest to the strongest cyclically adjusted fiscal position within just 4 years. And this is an extraordinary achievement, though expenditure driven by any international comparison. Bullet point 2. The question Katharina, a Greek newspaper, posed to me was the following. The Greek government says that at a time when all the indicators show that the economy is growing at the fastest rate in the EU, it is wrong to insist on hard austerity measures now. My answer was that fast growth is the best situation to keep budgets under control. Keeping expenditure under control does not necessarily constitute hard austerity, but common sense. We can discuss about this. And you cannot argue that austerity is bad when the economy is going up and also when it's going down. This is because otherwise you would per se negate the existence of periods which are well suited for cutting back and or avoiding excessive expenditure. And Daniel Gross and my replica to this tended always to be the same. We looked at Portugal, a comparing country, also a program country, and say if Greece would export like Portugal, the problem could be solved in a sense, because a small and now more and more open economy such as Greece cannot boost its demand by fiscal deficit if the money for this at the margin still has to come from foreign countries. This is not possible. And we also see that the danger, like Mario Monti yesterday, that the EU Commission's deal concerning the French deficit may be seen as a precedent by the Greek government, which plays into the hands of Syriza maybe, but also for the Spanish and Portuguese governments, which are facing new elections. This may be a problem. And finally, not to forget, it will become more difficult for the ECB, if we go for less austerity in Greece now, to purchase sovereign bonds within their quantitative easing, and also of French bonds, for instance, because this is the reason why I do not speak of a dogma, why Draghi insisted on budget discipline of euro area member countries. Although you may have noticed that Mario Draghi and Jackson Hole, in a recent conference in the summer, noticed that we need a two-handed approach in Europe. More demand, monetary policy is very expansionary right now, but also countries like Germany should feel responsible enough to not to stick too much to the black zero, should agree a little bit towards more smart austerity, go for more investment. As far their definition of the debt brake allows it, for instance, we can discuss it later on, how much this kind of investment should go. But on the other hand, Draghi was very keen on sound budgetary policies, in a sense, because he obviously wants to buy sovereign bonds next year. In a sense, you need less demand-oriented measures if you go for structural reforms, he argued, and you need less structural reforms if you have demand policies which persuade the European population to do this. So kind of multiple equilibria approach, as we call it as economists. The third point, this was the main point raised at the evening, and I was kind of surprised by that, and we had a vivid discussion about that. Is the Greek debt really sustainable? And do we need an additional haircut on Greek debt? This is a current topic. I was really surprised by that. 3 out of 4 panelists were in favor of it. If you want to answer the question, is Greek debt sustainable, you have to allude to the fact that it's mainly foreign debt and not domestic debt, like in the case of Japan, for instance. And you have to pay back, in the end, this foreign debt by exporting goods and services. This is a resource transfer which is necessary, otherwise you cannot pay back foreign debt. This is different from domestic debt, where you can tax national GDP in order to pay this back. So if exports continue to grow, as they seem to in Greece, it can become sustainable, especially at the ultra-low interest rates Greece is paying out on its official debt. The original main problem of Greece, the excessive government debt level, has been postponed to the far future quite some time ago by the euro area finance ministers. This is because the maturity of the granted loans is very long, on average 32 years, and maybe expanded even more, very low interest rates. The Troika's fifth review says, in principle, yes, it is sustainable. Why, we see in the next bullet point. And finally, admittedly, debt sustainability remains a serious concern. Debt to GDP is yet to peak. Extraordinary levels of debt to GDP ratio, we have now 175 percentage points, also due to the loans they received, is still rather high. And this is decisive, I think, if the doubts resurface about the political resolve in Greece to maintain a high primary surplus, a factor the Greek government can influence itself on own initiative, this would be the case. Point 4. This is a very important question in the light of the main topic here of this morning's seminar. Shouldn't the Europeans deliver their part on the Eurogroup's November 12 agreement on helping with the debt? So how to support Greece in reaching the goals of the fifth review programme? And if yes, should that be through a haircut, lowering interest rate, extending maturity or investment programmes, which are also discussed by the KfW, for instance, supported, and also the Juncker investment programme? Here it's very important that the Eurogroup statement on Greece from November 2012 said that the debt target is 124% in 2020 and below 110% in 2022. And it says only if these goals are foreseen not to be reached, there might be a haircut or other measures which become possible, but under the condition of a primary surplus and other commitments fulfilled. Pointing at a poor track record of the Greek government, especially before 2012, some say that there is simply no trust that any haircut in official debt would not just be used as an excuse to spend more and to reform less. But European partners, as I think, tend to deliver by trying to soften the troikas as well as the Greek government's stance in one way or the other. And I think personally that lengthening the maturity is the smallest problem for countries such as Germany, for instance, because Germany will be able to refinance itself rather cheaply. This is foreseeable in the next years. More difficult it will be for partner countries like France or so. What else speaks against a further haircut? A haircut may damage a country's reputation, at least as far as it is an industrialized country, research says. Sometimes developing countries profited very much from a haircut, and also Russia's default did not contribute to less reputation, so this is an open question. But let's remember that one haircut already had taken place, a PSI, private sector involvement, which was heavily discussed in the Committee of Economic and Monetary Affairs as well. It has taken place already, so that we now speak about an official sector involvement if Greece goes more for another haircut, OSI, official sector involvement. If you look at the debt structure of Greece, this is 70% vis-à-vis the EU and the IMF, only 8% vis-à-vis the ECB via the Securities Market Programme, and 20% market debt. That is, the IMF does not want to be included in a haircut. This was definitely said on Monday as well. The ECB neither, and also you cannot incorporate Greek banks, which are in danger, we have contagion effects. So what is left is the EU. If there will be a haircut, it's EU creditors which will be met. And here I think of some countries whose solidarity would or maybe shrink drastically. We can discuss it later on. Daniel Gross and myself did a simple calculation exercise. We argue that a big implicit haircut has taken place already. We have taken €100 debt as an example. Looked at the present value of this in 30 years. We took the 1% interest rates which Greece has to pay de facto right now, having a certain amount after 30 years, and then discount it with the 7% market interest rate which Greece implicitly has to pay, and what comes out, that debt is only 25 to 30% worth than without these alleviations of the maturity and the interest rate. And this is very interesting because this implies a haircut of 70 to 75%. And I was very surprised to see some people in Greece arguing, some investors now, who claim that this example shows that Greece has the lowest public debt in the euro area. And they can show it via taking accounting standards which are usually available, and if you compare the debt, this would mean excellent investment opportunities for people going to Greece, because public debt is de facto lower than claimed by the usual statistical tables by the EU Commission or so. What structural reforms should Greece put an emphasis on? The priorities are ensuring the financial sector is adequately capitalised, lag on productivity enhancing reforms. Very important, the implementation of the laws passed and rooting out corruption. Pension reforms. Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. So in general, yes, I'm passionate. No, I changed the topic. In general, I think Greece has lagged on productivity enhancing reforms. The adjustment took place mainly through recessionary channels. This is not that you had so many productivity enhancing reforms. You have to look for an implementation of the laws passed until today, and you have to have a look at rooting out corruption, which should be the priorities as I see them. Pension reform remains perhaps the most contentious issue among the government and the Troika. Of course, it's understandable that the government remains reluctant to do this because unemployment is standing at 27%. Pensions continue to support many Greek families. and sometimes even represent the only revenue of those, because there is an absence of other targeted forms of income support. Evidently, the Troika will be more flexible on labour market measures than on pensions. There has been a lot of labour market restructuring going on. The problem is not the reforms themselves, but their implementation, the quality of government, and so on. And we should be clear about the fact that without further progress in that area, progress will only be possible with a dramatic improvement in the efficiency of the public sector. And you have backlogs with privatization. Point 6. Putting too much pressure on the present Greek government to take additional measures makes it politically easier for the leftist opposition to come into power. This is what the Greeks were asking me. Is this something Chancellor Merkel takes or should take into account? In general, of course, I said I would leave this to the Greek people to decide whether right or left-wing governments are more likely to implement reforms. I myself do not have any party affiliation. But as the events of the previous days have shown, there is some support also by the Germans. I address the Germans here because I was asked with respect to Ms. Merkel. They will support an extension of the current programme, affording the Greek government time and space to ride out the presidential elections. So there is some package deal to be expected which supports Samaras with some arguments. You see that is a kind of political difficult struggle right now, the timing of elections and to time the Troika and the Troika support for Greece. They went for a prolongation of 2 months right now of the programme and want to combine it later on with a cautionary credit facility, but also very closely combined with some conditions. So I think Chancellor Merkel is clear about the fact that both venues, to soften the agreement a little bit, go for package deals, or to prolong the programme, would represent a political success of Samaras, and one argument less for Syriza in the coming elections. Point 7, very briefly, Syriza promises many measures like increasing the minimum wage and low-end salaries as well as pensions. We think that today these increases cannot be financed only if exports continue to grow. Wages and pensions can go up again. The third last point, very short, what would it mean for Greece and perhaps for Europe if Syriza would come to power, to the unification process, to the genuine economic monetary union? There would be a lot of nervousness all around, but the European partners have decided by now that Greece is no longer systemic and they are therefore prepared to be tough. So, final point on the ECB, and then I have to stop. What is going on in terms of strengthening economic and monetary union is ECB liquidity injections into the south, which directly poured and was flowing back to the north. What you see is in Berlin, for instance, as an example, huge Greek investments in real estate. Many Greeks investing in Berlin, for instance. So this points at a potential adjustment going for higher inflation in the north and lower inflation in the south. So there should be a differential. The ECB supported Greece via ELA, the emergency liquidity assistance, and lowered the standards for collateral, especially for Greek collateral. This was our previous paper for the monetary experts panel in the European Parliament, to follow the standards of collateral. Quantitative easing as a solution. I don't think that quantitative easing will work in Europe, whereas I admit that it worked at least for the 2 first QE programs in the US. Why? Because the US in general is a debtor country and profits by low interest rates. If you look at Germany, who should stimulate consumption, this is also my position, lower interest rate would lead to target saving. Many people have to save for their old age, and they will even save more. So consumption would not be stifled. Look at the fact that the QE worked in the US because people felt richer because they own houses. In Germany, for instance, the ownership rate is lower. People will feel it via higher rents. And investment, the main driver of investment is not necessarily low interest rates, it is political uncertainty. So if you go for the two-ended approach, this is my final remark, I think that Schäuble should go away from his black zero, but you should also say that the investment gap is not as high as often claimed. You are not allowed, I think, as an economist, to compare the degree of investment with the pre-crisis level, because in Spain, in Ireland, investment was exaggerated. So this is not a comparison you can do. And also the golden rule says net investment and not gross investment. All the depreciations have to be paid from the current budget, otherwise you go bankrupt. But in principle, there's a case of a modernization pact in terms of investment, and expansionary monetary policy should in the next month accompany it. So I think the example of Greece might be very illuminating in discussing the issues of today's seminar. Thank you.